Well, it seems like every quote I have for DP that has came up gets more and more interesting. Let's get this one started. Well, as you can see, this property owner maintains his property exceptionally well. This actually is a longtime friend of mine that I've known since I was about 14 years old. They come down to the area, Derby area, and they hunt turkeys, deer, and different things. So this is a large family that I've known for a long time, and he has an issue with what was, I believe, or can be, a very nice pond. You can see that there's been some work done. This property owner has drained the pond, had multitude of conversations with previous owners. I believe he is the 4th owner of this property. And to kind of give you guys the backstory, this pond started off as a smaller pond, not quite as deep, not quite as wide, and not quite as long. And it was a cattle pond, if you will. Well, then it was expanded, and the pond was essentially, I want to say 5 foot deep down in that center portion. The pond was expanded and it came up a couple of feet, but it never got any deeper. So they found some sandy soils over here on this left hand side. It was over here closer to the trees actually. So they expanded the pond again to get some of that good clay dirt out of there and lay it on this bank right here to solve that problem. And the water level made it up to the dark brown ring that you see just above the really green area down in here. But the water level did make it up to where it, what I'm going to say is, should be about 2 foot below the dam, kind of where you see that light yellow line, maybe just a hair below that, somewhere right around in here. But then after about 3 to 4 weeks, it would creep back down. Then he would get some rain and it'd jump back up to about where it should be. And then within 3 weeks or so, it'd get back down to that dark line again. So he's got a couple of different concerns here. Is the pond leaking down in the bottom? Personally, I don't think so. If it was leaking down in the bottom where the original pond was, I don't believe 2 foot of water is going to be enough extra hydraulic pressure to force it down. If it was leaking down in the center, even down at that lower 4 foot deep mark, I believe that water would still leak. Right now there's only a couple of inches of water in there because we just got some rain a couple of days ago, but it has been dry. He's been keeping it dry, and he's been taking some of this field dirt, if you will, sediment from just wash over the years coming out of the yard, etc. And he's been using it to fill in some bad areas up in here that was hard for him to maintain, or it was rough on the mower. So he's taken out that sediment dirt a little at a time. For us to take out that sediment dirt, it's a pretty quick process, so we will get that dirt out of there. But I believe the problem is either when this pond was expanded, the core wasn't brought up properly, or there's a layer of dirt right about that dark line that is allowing the water to leak. We'll go over there in that corner here shortly, but there are a couple of root wads. You can kind of see one right there, and then there's 2 or 3 root wads in that corner. But he keeps this bank brush hogged off, so he's maintaining his back slope. And he did state that he sees, when the pond has water in it, he sees a wet spot down in there, and maybe one other over in there, and there's a stack of root wads down on his backside. Could have been a wet spot over there by where he's trying to burn those stumps. So they expanded the pond. They brought some clay out because they found a sandy layer over here, and it held water up to the dark line. Then the water came above the dark line. Then it goes down to the dark line. That's the quick, this is what the pond is doing. How can I make this pond hold water? Well, he's had some other people come look at it. They have talked about mixing in some bentonite down into this dirt area, mixing it with the clay dirt, scraping half of the sediment out, because it does have clay in it. You can see where it's cracking up, but it's also growing grass, so it's got some good organic matter in it. I'm not for sure at the cost of bentonite and the cost of equipment coming in here, getting some good clay out of the bottom, mixing it with bentonite, putting it back, and layering it up these banks, if that's going to give you enough of a fix. And in my mind, digging some test holes in this dam, 4 or 5 test holes throughout. I did step this off. It's 120 yards from where I believe the core would need to be tied in throughout the entire dam over to the back side of the cabin. There is a low spot over there. That's the emergency spillway. I would want to get rid of that. I'll explain that here in a minute. But if we dig down, I believe we're going to find throughout here somewhere there is a layer in which it's allowing the water to leach through the dam and end up at a slightly lower elevation back here on this back side. So if we go down here and stand right here on this brown line where the water does not get any higher, if it does get any higher, it leaks right back down to this spot. You guys are my eye level, and we are right almost in line with top of dam. If we walk over here to the back slope, we get down here to where he said it was pretty close to a leak, or a wet spot, should I say, not a leak. You guys are right in line with my eye, and we are right again, almost that exact same elevation. And if water does leak through this dam, it might not come out at the exact elevation because water does run downhill and it takes the least path of resistance. It's probably going to end up somewhere down there right along that fence. If the leak path starts at 6 foot down, it's probably going to end up over here at 8 or 10 foot down. You can see that kind of drops off. So it kind of starts to make sense that this layer, that elevation of that black line, is potentially the issue with the dam. This dam is built really nicely. I'm not going to take that away from anybody. It's got a great back slope. It's got a great inside slope. What I don't know is what is truly in the core. I don't have a crystal ball for that. The only way to find that out is to dig some test holes, figure out what kind of dirt we're working with. I believe the core's not bad. It just may not have had proper compaction to ensure that, you guys know what that means, to ensure that the water does not have an easy path to escape through the dam. I said I'd explain this over here in this corner. There's a really nice head section on the other side of this cabin where the water comes off that hillside and ends up in the pond. And then that entire left-hand side where that trail is, the water comes over and ends up on that left corner of the pond. But we have some, he said they were willows, some root systems down in here that could cause the problem. I don't think that's going to cause the severity of this problem. And there's one other right there that could create a leak path, but for us to come in here and rip those out with the excavator, I don't have that as a concern. What I do have as a concern is this being the lowest spot in this dam. That means if it does come up to the proper elevation, its easiest path, least path of resistance is out this corner. So this is an emergency overflow is what this is. If that pond was where it belongs, again, about right here, kind of up in that yellow just a little bit, 2 foot of freeboard. Well, this could stay wet quite frequently if he gets decent rains. So I recommended that we bring the dam elevation up and tie it into this slope here so that there is no emergency overflow whatsoever. And we put in an overflow pipe in that corner because there's a really nice ditch that runs right through those trees and continues and goes all the way down and ends up in a creek way down there. To me, the real solution is coming in just to the left of that pin oak right here, starting our core, digging out the current core on this front third of the dam all the way over, ensuring we can bring that up. I said it again, you know what to do. Bring that up to get rid of the emergency spillway. Dig down at minimum that 6 foot to get below that line. Figure out what that area looks like, and personally I believe we're gonna have to go down deeper. So the way I would quote this as a fix to a core leak would be 6 foot wide, 10 foot deep. 10 foot deep is going to get my core below the bottom of the pond. That would allow us to dig all this out, either stage it on the inside slope or stage it on the back slope, or a little bit of both. Get that core reestablished to the point in which it should be at. Start putting that decent dirt, because it's holding water, it's just not holding it perfectly. Get that decent dirt back in there in 1 foot lifts all the way across. Get our sheep's foot roller, run that sheep's foot roller and compact that dirt to the proper compaction to create a good seal. And I don't think we're going to have to do anything with the inside slope or the back slope other than polish it up after we get our core reestablished. Now the other benefit to this job site, it's starting to rain pretty darn hard. The other big positive to this job site is he owns all this property through here, and it is a hillside which slopes off to the left. So if we do find an area in that core that isn't good dirt, we can come up in here, assuming there's good dirt here. Again, this quote is going to be contingent on good dirt on site and good reusable dirt in the current core. But we could come up in here and borrow pit some dirt out of this area, assuming it's good dirt, and transferring it right here to the dam, which is really close. Again, from here to the back side of the cabin, walking across the dam, it's only 120 yards. So we're not going to be moving dirt exceptionally far. It's just a point in fact that we're going to have to move that dirt 2 and 3 times to properly reestablish that core. And when I say 2 times for sure, potentially 3, you might have to put some on the left and put some on the right, which essentially means you're going to grab that dirt again and put it back in the hole, it being good dirt. So with all that being said, I'm going to go back to the laptop, use the Hunt Stand app, draw out how we would redig that core, explain to you guys where we would put the dirt on the edges. I'm also going to run this one past DP, because I believe we can do all that work without having to dig the dam out completely over there in the center, for example. I may be wrong on that, but I believe we can recore this without having to take the dam completely out. Again, I'm going to run that by DP, but I will lay this out for you guys and show you all the lines, all the potentials, and maybe I'll have my conversation with DP beforehand and all this will be totally different, but I'm pretty confident that's the path we're going to take. So we'll get to the laptop and finish up this video. Well, here we are as promised. This is the pond that is leaking, unfortunately. As you guys can see here, this was before he drained the pond. It has quite a bit of water in it, but you can see if I zoom in here where it still isn't quite up to what that black line is, which is right in here. So it is pretty obvious that this pond has a leak. Pretty confident the recoring is going to be the proper process. I did have the conversation with DP. He agrees with my thought process. So we're going to lay this out for you guys to get you a much better understanding of the how we would go about this. I am not going to draw these lines perfectly on the front third of this, but we're going to get this thing pretty close. So to show you guys where the core would need to be dug out, we would come back in here, because this area in here we know for a fact had a sandy layer of dirt and it allowed the pond to leak. That was fix number 1. That has now been corrected. So we don't want to reopen any of those issues. So as we come over into here, I would want to start our core back off of this right corner and come right along this front third. And again, this isn't going to be drawn perfectly, but we're going to get pretty close. And we would dig what you're going to see between these two lines. And I know it gets a little shady over here on this side, so it's going to be a little bit harder to tell, but right here is that cabin, and this is where those willows were over in the corner, those root wads that we will remove. Bring that core all the way over pretty darn close to the property line, just off the back side of the cabin there. This would be 8 feet that we would dig this. The D4 blade is 8 feet wide, so we are going to go to 300 and some change on feet there. I know sometimes you guys can't see that. Then come back through here, make the same shape again. Close off our shape once we get to this far end. And that would be the new core that we would establish. And I'm calling that a new core. We're going to make that red. Because there is, per the conversation with the customer, there was a core established by the original builder. What he's uncertain of is when they did the expansion and they raised the elevation of the dam to be able to expand the pond, is how well the core was established. Excuse me, meaning, did they just start putting dirt right on top of the existing dam? Or did they go down into the existing dam 3 or 4 feet to make the layer of the two cores that are on top of each other proper? Or if they just stacked it on top and packed it in place, or didn't pack it in place at all. We have seen where some pond builders, when building their core, will simply run their dozer in and out of their core to compact that dirt, which means you get decent compaction right under the tracks. But if your core is the same width as your blade, it's really hard to get any compaction in the center or truly on the outside edges, whereas our process using a sheep's foot vibratory roller, it allows us to get darn near right up on the edge and packed throughout the entire width of the core. So again, this core being 8 feet wide, we would be able to pack the entire core, the full 8 feet, with our roller. But prior to doing that, we have got to establish some areas and stage this dirt. So my thought process, and this may be where once DP's on the job site, he does this completely different, but my thought process is if we can stack this dirt that we dig out of this core, again, 8 feet wide, 10 foot deep, on the outside slope, and what it really comes down to at that point in time is how tall can we stack the dirt up and not make it a more interesting situation. So there on those yellow lines is where I believe we can stack the dirt that comes out of this core on the back slope, which will give us enough room to come back here with the dozer when we're ready to put the dirt back in the core. Again, everybody, assuming that dirt is proper dirt for a core, and start shoving that dirt back in there at an angle, kind of like you see here. Not going to put a name to that. Throughout this entire push, come in from that backside. Hopefully there'd be enough room between the tree line, but you guys kind of get this picture. I'll give you one more arrow here. We'd come in from here and kind of push dirt that way. I know I didn't draw an arrow there, but it gives you a really good understanding. Come back to the end. Gives you a good understanding of my thought process there. If we don't have enough room to stack all the dirt on the back slope of this pond, I do believe we would, since the pond would be drained, be completely shoved out of any sediment that is washed down in there. I do believe we have the extra capacity to come in here and stack that core dirt that we would reuse. Then on the inside slope, which then realistically makes it more like a new pond build, because typically you're bringing your good dirt out of the area that the water will be once the pond is built. But this would give us another area for, I'm going to call it spoils, just like I did last time. But those spoils, we are hopeful that they will be usable spoils. And what that allows, if we have to stack it on the inside, is again the exact same thought process. You can come in here with the dozer, push the dirt into the core that we would dig, that being that 10 foot deep, 8 foot wide, and push that dirt in the bottom, dang it, I did that wrong, in the bottom of the very large trench that we would create to bring it up in lifts. And I know you guys have seen DP build several ponds. This one's interesting, right? The pond's there, the core's leaking, we have to reestablish that core. So if we can mitigate the cost for the customer of tearing the dam completely out, and honestly then having maybe some not so good dirt mixed in with some good dirt and building a questionable core, if this core dirt is good, that should ensure that once it's packed properly with the vibratory roller, we now have a stop path in which that water is utilizing today. So if I was to give you guys a side profile, you guys know I always like drawing these back slopes and cores and inside slopes as two triangles and a rectangle. So this red area here that I'm getting ready to draw now would be our 10 foot deep. I know it might not end up 8 foot wide, but 8 foot wide recoring of the current dam. Let's save that, make it red, call that our core, then throw our inside slope on this thing. What that does is it allows us to repair the pond without ever really manipulating the two triangles that you see there. That mitigates cost because we're not moving any of this dirt. The only dirt that we're moving is the core. And this being the outside slope, this being the inside slope, this is where we would stack that dirt up along through here. And this slope is much less than this slope that I drew here. So you guys got to remember, we've got a pretty large area from where we would dig that core to this tree line. I would say at least 40 yards that we could sneak some dirt in there, but we got to leave ourselves 30, 20 feet, something like that over here on this backside so we don't have to tear the trees out to be able to push the core dirt back into the core and get it packed properly. Now, I mentioned on the video that over here in this area, he owns all of this as well. If this is good dirt, we have the ability to come, oops, forgot that one, to come in this area over here, which is on a slope, so we'll be able to hide the borrow pit much better than if it wasn't a slope. And it kind of comes over into here, comes down, and then shoots back down, that tall grassy area that you saw earlier. But this area here is potential for a borrow pit. And I think it's funny that everybody calls these borrow pits because you really never give the dirt back. You're more than just borrowing it. You're using it forever. But that would allow us to shape this really nicely, continue his slope, tie it in somewhere down in here near the property line. But assuming this is good usable dirt, if we do need any, it's not that far from the repair work that we have to do here. Now, I mentioned an overflow pipe earlier. The reason I prefer an overflow pipe, this is personal preference, but with the way that this man takes care of his property, if this stays wet all the time over on this side, this is an area, if the pond holds water like it should, this is an area that would be very hard for him to keep mowed, and essentially he would end up having to put some riprap in there, and he would either use some type of Roundup or weed killer to mitigate the weeds that would grow in there, and or he would have to weed eat it. And to me, that's just a really big pain in the butt. So if we come over here off of this corner, once we reestablish a good core, and again, 2 foot of freeboard, and we install an overflow pipe right here, there is a really nice ditch just at the base of the back slope of this pond that carries all the way down through here and essentially gets down over in this area and dissipates out into this field. And we're not adding any more water than what is going there today. The only difference is it keeps the water from coming out and keeping the yard wet over here, and ensures that that comes out into the woods where Mother Nature's trees are going to provide really good erosion control, and the trees will probably absorb the majority of the water that comes out of this. If you have a 5-inch rain, yes, there's going to be a lot of water coming out of that pipe quickly, but most of the time you get anywhere from 1/2 inch to 2-inch rains, and it's going to slowly come out of that pipe, and these trees are going to absorb a whole lot of that water and mitigate any issues that a overflow pipe would create on a property that didn't have trees. So that gives you guys the bird's eye view and the thought process of the boots on the ground review of this quote. Hopefully we will land this, because this is going to be a very, very, very interesting recoring of this dam. And I still truly believe that that's the best approach. The more likelihood that it's going to solve the problem versus the bentonite and mixing it in with good dirt and trying to create a layer that essentially is a few inches thick on the entire bowl of the pond that would hold the water and keep it from making it to the leak path that you know is there today. This might cost the individual a little bit more, but you're putting in the proper leak stop for a pond, opposed to putting in a few inches of layered product that might hold water. And again, you can't ever guarantee a pond, but if I was to put a percentage to it, this would be the highest percentage of likelihood to fix the issue over trying to put bentonite in the bottom of this pond. Not that bentonite's a bad option. It is an option that's out there. I just feel, and DP feels, recoring of this dam is the much higher percentage of success to create a true solution, opposed to a potential of layering of bentonite. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you enjoyed the explanation. And as always, like, comment, subscribe.